So I've been struggling to talk about this. I didn't finish the other videos technically. It cut off. Um, so I guess I can start there. But I've been struggling to talk about these things in part because I've just been so far removed from them. And also because they're so heavy. So getting back into it is like energetically uh, exhausting. And there's been a fair amount of fear attached to these things, which, like, if I know anything at all, it's that fear of these things is what gives them power. So, like, I haven't wanted to engage as long as I've held on to any of that fear, but I'm not afraid anymore. I more just want to make sure that I'm not giving out false information um, about things. So I don't want to talk like I have it all figured out or like I'm like actively studying any of these things or anything like that. Um, because I don't know a lot and I'm not actively studying these things. And even if I were, it's still in the active experience of them that you really gain any knowledge. So what I know comes through that. Um, but that's also why my knowledge of these things seems like so random and few and far between. It's because it is. Most everything I've learned about anything has come through experience rather than proper education. So, that being said, the last video I left off with was basically talking about the couple times I had done drugs with the person that I lived with Kevin in Baltimore, and how he was using those things to he had hoped at least to use those things to kind of knock me off my own consciousness, and to, like, especially the shrooms he was using to get me in a vulnerable psychological state so that he could um, continue brainwashing me. Ultimately, the whole goal of all of his practices were to keep me as low vibrational as possible in order to access control over me. But I mean, with the crazy takeaway, I suppose, from all of it has been that those same efforts to keep me in low vibrations have also been the keys to access higher vibrations. So, which was also his ultimate goal. Um, I think he got a little too involved in his own ego about things to the point of almost assuming that the process would make me essentially like a slave of his, like that I would bend over backwards for him and serve him instead of myself. But in order to teach me how to properly serve him, he had to teach me uh, forms of self-actualization that I received as such. That wasn't supposed to be how I received those things. I can tell just from his behavior, but like I assume that he uh, had underestimated me, as most do, um, as naive, ignorant, people pleasing to the degree of being willing to let someone else completely control me. And that had been a quality that I had carried for most of my existence and well into adulthood. Um, a desire to be controlled. Um, it took learning how to control myself and the benefits thereof for me to realize how much I don't want that, um, and how much I prefer like equal cooperation in my relationships. Um, so he wasn't the first or the last to have recognized my capacity for servitude and try to exploit it. Um, he wasn't even the first to do that through means of, you know, magic and abuse of it. Um, I left after all of the after everything that had been happening. Things got really bad, and I was trying my hardest to fight my way out of it. And he recognized that, so things continued to get worse. I ended up leaving pretty unexpectedly. I had been moving things into my car, and I'm trying to think how that even worked, because we had his car for a while and we didn't have mine. And then somehow we did have mine. We must have, because he lost his car. Or maybe I did have mine there, but we just used his. No, because I was using his and then he got it taken away. He like called the repo man on himself in order to get the car taken away so that I wouldn't have access to fleeing. But I had my car at some point, so I don't remember how I got my car. I don't know. Um, I don't know, but I did have my car, and I ended up slowly packing it and leaving, and pretty unexpectedly, as I tend to do. And he, the first time, was in tears, calling me nonstop, trying to get me to come back, trying to get me not to leave. Um, and it was really difficult to hear the emotions in him when I hadn't seen those things that way exactly prior, to hear him begging for my, you know, life, for my, attention and affections, or for me to be able to come back to him, was triggering, and it did make me want to go back to him. But I was like, nope, I'm leaving. I already set this out. So I drove back from Baltimore to Wisconsin, where my parents lived. And at the time, like, I was just out of my mind. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what reality was. I didn't, I was out of my mind. Um, but I wasn't like aware, like I had mentioned in the other video, how when I came back, I had become convinced of this delusion that I was essentially my own clone. I wasn't conscious of that yet, or maybe he hadn't even fully enacted that yet. Um, but as soon as I got back to my parents' house, I think I told them I was coming, but like shortly before I came, and like while I was on my way there. And I showed up to their house and it was like 10 p.m., so everybody was already asleep. My brother lived with them at the time, and my middle brother. And uh, when I got to the house, I remember walking in and feeling like disgusted. Like, I was like, this isn't right. This isn't where I want to be. This isn't actually going to help me find myself. And I felt just as scared at my parents' house as I had felt with Kevin. Um, so I didn't unpack any of my things. I was in, well, plus I had driven like 18 hours, but I was just straight. I kept making the trip back and forth from Baltimore to Wisconsin, just straight through. Um, but I was just like out of my mind. Like, I was not grounded whatsoever. And I remember I was delusional as fuck. And I sat down on the couch and they had this old Bible. Maybe it was one of my great grandparents or something because I had never seen it, but it was very old and it was very, very big, and one of those ones that's written with like real fancy handwriting and stuff and pictures and stuff. And it was open on the coffee table. And I remember sitting there and just starting to read what it had been opened to. For some reason in my head, Matthew 24 just came to mind, but I cannot say at all that that's what it actually was. I don't remember what it was when I was reading it, but I remember that reading it tripped me out. It made me really, really uncomfortable, and it made me realize that I wasn't supposed to be there, or that it wasn't any better to be there. But I didn't know where else to go to find myself. And I know now that what was happening was that Kevin, after I had left him, was doubling down on his witchcraft, um, of which I had been tied to. So it was affecting me, because I was not grounded in myself at all. And so I was very given to it. And at the same time, my own family has been engaged in their own shit. So the mix of those things had me extremely sensitive, and reading the Bible just was too much. It was just an absolute trip. And I literally spent like 15 minutes maybe in the house before I just went back into the car and just immediately drove back to Baltimore. So by the time my family woke up, I was already like halfway, more than halfway back to Baltimore. And they were upset about that. And I didn't care. I was lost. I was so lost. I didn't know what to do. Going back to Baltimore and going back to Kevin had felt like a dog returning to its vomit. As they say, a dog throws up and then wants to rush back in and keep eating it. Um, just to get that stuff back in me. Like, why'd that come out? Why'd that come out of me? I gotta get that back in there. Um, it felt like an what would you call that? An instinct. It wasn't a conscious decision. Even leaving hadn't felt like a conscious decision, but it was far more conscious than coming back. Coming back felt like an instinct. And I pretty much was dissociated enough by the time I got back to Baltimore that I was just like, I know things are going to be worse, but I was given to it. The magic that he'd been performing on me, I was a mix of a lot of things. And the only magic that I've studied, like I don't practice witchcraft. I never have. I've studied what I've studied in the dark arts and in the mystery schools and all of, these different variations on the occult in order to understand merely what had been done to me and what was happening to me, not just through Kevin, but through my childhood. Um, and uh, I'll get into this in a minute, but also, yeah, I was trying to understand the brainwashing that I had made allowances for, essentially. But I was never studying those things to actively practice them. It was just, anytime that you become educated about certain things, it does become a part of you. Um, and you find, and my tendency, especially with my toxic codependency, was to rely on external resources for a sense of clarity and grounding that I didn't have enough myself yet. So a lot of the studying that I did end up becoming a practice of sorts, but not through intention. Again, so much of it was just instinct. Um, and that is what I've been continually working through now since I've removed myself from all of these things. But it has taken some time, and so much of it didn't even cultivate until this year. Um, so you can look into my recent past and see me still actively engaging in certain thought processes and practices that aren't truly reflective of my being or my beliefs. But at the time, they were what I was using to gain access to this point, uh, mostly unknowingly. Um, when I got back to Baltimore, I was just so dissociated that, like, everything, I was there for 2 weeks before I left again. His intent was for me to be there for a year. It was 11 months, and his intent was for me to be there at least for a year, and that by the year mark, was when there would be a shift into an evolution of becoming who it was that he was crafting me to be. Um, and I was keenly aware of that, but I didn't know. It wasn't like it was necessarily written down anywhere, and I didn't know exactly how to engage with my intuition in those ways that was allowing me that type of information. Still pretty, I was consciously like at a point of only being able to recognize what was being given to me externally. Um, like I said, that took a really long time to get out of that mindset. Um, so I don't even remember what that 2 weeks was like, aside from the fact that it was extremely chaotic. Um, I think it was after I came back that time that he dragged me out of the house by my hair actually happened. Um, I think that's when I started cutting. Was within that 2 weeks. I don't think I had prior. I think prior I was getting extremely manic, and I would like yell and freak out and run away. I kept running away. I kept leaving the house and either locking myself in the car. I wouldn't let him come into the car, and I would just be like crying and freaking out in the car. I would like go run into the woods. I remember hiding in the sewer multiple times, or just like running like through through fucking Baltimore, like just and hiding and crying and being just out of my fucking mind. Um, and it just kept progressing to the point that by the time I got back, like I couldn't run away. So that's when I started cutting. I was so messed up, and it's so weird to like I was actively obviously experiencing those things, so I can go back into my memory and recall those experiences, but it's very almost discomforting in so many ways because of how far removed from those mindsets I am now. Um, that going back is almost like like EDMR works. You use you use it to it's a form of therapy that they use for people with complex PTSD or severe PTSD in order to go back into their traumas and be able to relive them from a healthy, stable state. As an adult, you can go back into your childhood traumas and be able to recognize, oh, but I'm an adult now, so I don't have to be affected by those things the way that I was as a child. It felt like that, where I was like so dissociated then that being able to recall those memories now and go back into those memories now, like I'm dissociated from that dissociation. So it's almost like looking at myself in third person and just being like, I mean, I have empathy for myself looking back, but like it's also like, wow, like just so it's crazy to think of all of it. I mean, even recently, even this year when I was under so much attack, like people make jokes about it and stuff, and like, but like, uh, spellcrafting is real. The people that engage in it truly believe in it, and all I believe in is that we manifest our reality. And so a hardcore enough belief will manifest. And, again, that's why like I've struggled to talk about a lot of these things, because like I don't want to give credence to a belief in them, because I don't want to give them power over me. But plenty of people that I've interacted with do believe these things, and they believe them, or at least have believed them, even more than I believed like in myself, at those times. And so I was given to their control. Um, he was studying chaos magic really like in depth at the time, and was trying to use it to contain me. His ultimate goal, which I ended up, I don't practice magic. The best that I have is protection methods against it, which is its own form of magic, but what it isn't, you know, um, I don't do spellcrafting any more than what is naturally inherent in our existence. I believe myself to be a naturalist and a pagan for those purposes. Um, it's a very simple, like natural ex- form of consciousness that I use. But at the same time, because of the magic that I was coming up against, I have used those energies and worked with those entities. Um, it was my only defense. It wasn't that I was like fighting fire with fire. That I've never done. That I've always been very set on not doing. Um, the people pleasing aspect of my personality wasn't just, and that's why I've been so easily misunderstood and underestimated, is because most people, if they were to be as people pleasing as I've been, it would be coming from a place of insecurity and a low sense of self. But I've always had a weirdly high sense of self, or like deep sense of self, in the way that, like, even as a child, my obedience or willingness to submit to others' power came through, like, there was an insecurity, obviously, that drove me to be like, yeah, I want these people to control me instead of me controlling myself. That was my low vibration. But even in my highest vibrations, I was still willing to give myself into these different states of consciousness because, well, one, curiosity kills the cat. Thank God the cat has 9 lives. But, you know, uh, part of it was curiosity, just wanting to understand the psychology behind the individual trying to control me. Um, and that came from, if you can control me better than I can control myself, then I can learn from you how to control myself, right? Like, so that's what I would do. I would willingly put myself into those positions of suppression, oppression, abuse, any form of control, in order to find myself, in order to learn myself, in order to learn what that control looked like and what it meant. And the ways that I've gotten out of those things has always come through essentially people getting so caught up in their ego in controlling me that they get lackadaisical. They believe that, since I am so given to their control, that they are in control, not knowing that I'm learning from those things that entire time, or underestimating my capacity to learn from those things in a supposed lower state. But like I said, like, I wasn't really fully in as lowered of a state as they believed me to be. Growing up, I struggled with almost like Stockholm syndrome type uh, beliefs. And that was, most people aren't given to that uh, level of consciousness. I'm not saying it's a high level, but most people aren't given to Stockholm syndrome. Most people, they're they have fight or flight, and I had fawning. So, but it was a defense mechanism, just the same as fight or flight. And I learned flight. That became, an increasing form of defense for me, and still is to a degree, but it's not um, in the way that, like, oh, a bird is spooked and so it flies off, or this deer that got startled so it ran in front of a bus. It's not like that where it did used to be. I'm grounded now where, you know, I choose to fly when I need to, when I want to, when I find that there's nothing more for me in a position, but I'm also able to stay grounded when I need to in order to learn a lesson. Um, so he didn't, yeah, I mean, no, he definitely had started to realize I had started, I mean, everything that he was teaching me was the leaving and the coming back had actually initiated. All it took was that little bit of time, that 2 days or whatever it was, really, um, for me to, and I was still completely dissociated, but I was now, I had separated, I had put a boundary in between his power and mine, um, and I had enacted it on my power to a degree that, although it wasn't much, it was enough to strike a little fear in him. He realized that his programming wasn't fully complete, and that I was not as willing as he had hoped that I would be at that point to be continue to be given to it. Um, and so there was a lot of guilting in that 2 weeks, a lot of shaming, a lot of emotional abuse and mental abuse to try to get me to believe that rebellion was wrong and shallow, and that was my low vibrations, and that being given to him was uh, the point. That was supposed to be the goal. That's what we were doing. That's what we've spent all these months building up to. And I just wouldn't swallow it. I wouldn't swallow that pill. Um, and so he became very frustrated, and with his studying chaos magic in order to try to use it against me, he himself was becoming quite chaotic, and it was no longer easy for me to be given to submitting to him, because he was all over the place, which was a gift. Um, but he started treating my dog poorly, which at that point where I was like, all right, we're not doing this anymore. I'm leaving again. I'll do whatever it takes, even if I have to go back to my parents and it's worse there. I'd rather, they say better the devil you know, and I've never really been one to be given to that for very long. I'm curious enough and let my curiosity drive me, because I would rather learn something new and look at things from a different aspect or a different perspective and gain some footing that way than stay somewhere that I just can't gain footing. Um, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think better the devil you know. Like, I made a joke about it the other day where it's like, yeah, but that person like lied to you or cheated on you or abused you or like deceived you in these ways. Like, if you know that it's not better to stay around in those things, it's better to risk finding something even worse, because you're also risking finding something much better, and if you find something worse, you get yourself out of that, and then you find something better. You just keep going that route. As long as you're under fucking magic manipulation, as much as I've been. And so much of what has driven me into the lifestyle that I've lived this entire time has been me running from magic, from other people's magic, from other people's misuse of magic against me, or intended proper use of dark magic against me. Um, it's something I'm just super sensitive to, and it's something I refuse to uh, engage with as soon as I am aware that that's what's happening. Um, the reason that I have dealt with this more than the average person, I don't think most of the people, I mean, I meet a lot of people that practice these things and are engaged in these things. I'm a magnet for it because I've been marked by it as a child.